Season 2 of Apple's Shrinking begins with Jimmy visiting Grace in jail. She is there because she pushed her husband Donnie off a cliff at the end of Season 1. Jimmy is questioning everything he did after meeting with Grace because she doesn't even want to speak with him. She feels guilty about what she did. And when Jimmy goes back to visit her for a second time, she tells him that her life might not have been great before, but it was way better than it is now. This prompts Jimmy to talk with Paul and ask whether he messed up with his patients. Paul tells him he needs to operate more by the book, and he also takes Shawn away as a client because he says Jimmy has gotten too close and it's unprofessional. Paul tells Jimmy that Shawn at this point will tell Jimmy anything not to disappoint him, and he does just this. When an old army buddy comes into town, Jimmy tells Shawn he should talk to him, even though it makes Shawn uncomfortable. Shawn doesn't speak with him, but he also tells Jimmy that he did, just so he doesn't disappoint him. At this point, we are introduced to Lewis, the man who drove drunk and killed Jimmy's wife Tia. Lewis shows up at Jimmy's work, and Jimmy yells at him, telling him to get out of his office. We learn from Jimmy's conversation with Paul that he's really mad at himself and not Lewis. When he sees Lewis, he's reminded how he fell apart and abandoned his daughter after Tia died. Alice is having her own issues with Lewis when she shows up at his coffee shop and curses him out. However, when she does this, she leaves her notebook accidentally at the coffee shop. Lewis attempts to go to Jimmy and Alice's home to return the notebook, but just when he is walking up into the driveway, Brian sees him. Brian initially yells at him and tells him to get out of there, but eventually the two become friends. Alice learns about what's going on here, and she forces Brian to set up a meeting with Lewis and her, and she actually forgives Lewis for what he's done, and the three of them start to become close. So close that when they are out to dinner one night talking about how they are going to reveal this to Jimmy, he sees them through a window and instantly feels betrayed. He flashes back to 3 years prior when his wife Tia died. We see Lewis and his fiancée, and they look very happy. We see him leaving a restaurant after having a few drinks with friends, and then we see the aftermath of the accident. Lewis tells his fiancée in the days that follow that he doesn't want her to visit him in prison, and he wants her to just walk away, even though it guts him. Jimmy, after the accident, is barely present. He can't help Alice with anything, deferring to Liz to help Alice with everything that she needs. Flash forward to present day, and when Alice gets home from the restaurant, she talks with her father, telling him he should speak to Lewis, and he should forgive him for both himself and Lewis. And Jimmy takes her up on this, and he does speak to Lewis. He forgives him, but he also tells Lewis to stay away from his family. At this point in the story, Shawn's anger begins to pop up again when Liz sells her share of the food truck to Shawn's father, Tim. Shawn has a lot of resentment towards his father because of how his father behaved when he returned from the war. Shawn was hurting and struggling, and his dad acted like everything was okay. And when he started getting into fights, his dad kicked him out to show him tough love. And Tim thinks that this is what turned Shawn around, but really it didn't have anything to do with it, and Shawn has a lot of resentment about it. Paul and Jimmy eventually convince Shawn that he needs to tell his dad how he feels, but it doesn't go well when Shawn does. Tim is angry when he hears that Shawn carries resentment towards him, and he says that this is what therapists always do. They always tell people to blame their parents before storming out. After this conversation, Shawn is in a bad place, and he goes and picks a fight with some construction workers, and he doesn't even fight back. He just lets them beat him up, enough to the point that he ends up in the hospital. Paul and Jimmy visit Shawn in the hospital, and they decide they need to talk with Tim. They need to try and fix this situation. They find Tim fishing, and Tim reveals to them that he got so angry with Shawn because he feels like he did let him down. Tim eventually visits Shawn at the hospital, and they are able to make amends. Paul is having some struggles of his own with his past relationships. He feels a lot of shame and guilt when he thinks about his first marriage. He worked too much, and he cheated on his wife, and he wasn't there as a father. These feelings are really surfacing for Paul as he struggles with his declining health as a result of Parkinson's. His work performance is declining, and he's having trouble remembering what his clients tell him. More than that, he's carrying these difficulties into his relationship with Julie, because he doesn't want her to be his caretaker. One of the things that really helps him is his ex-wife Susan forgiving him for the affair and the way their marriage went. Paul slowly learns to step out of his shell, asking Julie to move in with him, and he also becomes friends with one of his old clients named Raymond. This is something Paul would have never done if Jimmy hadn't encouraged him to do so. Gabby's mother is also having difficulty with her aging. She needs someone to take care of her, and to this point, it's been Gabby's sister Courtney. Courtney has been the one taking care of her mother for years, almost as a penance for years of difficulty that she put her family through when she was using drugs. Now, however, she feels like she's done enough, and she joins the army after getting Gabby's blessing. This is a problem for Gabby, as now her mother wants to move in with her, and Gabby can't say no to this kind of thing. In Paul's words, she's a caretaker, and she looks out for others while neglecting herself, which she does over and over again in Season 2. That is until she tells her mother that she doesn't want her to move in with her, telling her that she'll get her live and help at her own home. She does this to move on with her own life and prioritize things like her budding relationship with other Derek's friend from work. Speaking of Derek, him and Liz are beginning to have a lot of problems after Liz reconnects with an old boyfriend, Mac, who kisses her. Derek never liked this guy, and he warned Liz about it. It looks like they are going to possibly get a divorce before Derek talks with Gabby and realizes he was not present for Liz. After this conversation, he does forgive Liz, and they are able to rekindle their relationship. Throughout season 2, Brian and his husband Charlie begin the process of trying to adopt a baby, even though Brian never wanted to do this. Charlie, however, really does. Eventually, Brian sets aside his reservations and agrees to the adoption process because he loves Charlie. From the get-go, they run into a problem when they begin the process. Someone wants to give them their baby instantly, like the next day. Brian is panicked because he thought at least he'd have 9 months, and this is even too much for Charlie. They decide to slow down and they look for an adoption which is out further in the future. Eventually, they do find a potential person who interviews them about the perspective of them adopting her baby. However, she decides to choose a different family to adopt. Brian is genuinely heartbroken about this, and Charlie is touched because he can tell that Brian really cares about the process now. Jimmy buys Alice a car for her birthday, and she hangs out with her friends that night after a party at Jimmy's house. Jimmy is feeling good about himself because not only did he seem to do everything right on Alice's birthday, but he potentially met someone who he had a romantic spark with when he bought Alice's car. This nice moment is ruined for Jimmy when Alice barges in and reveals that she spoke with Lewis, who wasn't returning her texts. She learns that Jimmy told Lewis to stay away from her, even though the relationship with him and Brian was really helping her. Alice can't understand why Jimmy won't help Lewis like he does with everyone else, and she tells him he's not who she always thought he was. Ultimately, she ends up sleeping at Gabby's house for a while because she says she needs some space from Jimmy. When talking with Paul, Paul tells Jimmy that he needs to tell us the truth, and he can't hide from his trauma anymore because it will go poorly. He'll end up being like he was after Tia died. Paul tells Jimmy that he'll never be able to forgive himself unless he bears his soul to Alice and apologizes. When Jimmy comes home one day and he sees Alice isn't there because she's at Gabby's house, he loses it. He looks like he's disoriented. He walks out into traffic without even seeming to know it. He also calls one of the old sex workers that he used to hang out with after Tia died, and she doesn't do that anymore, which is lucky for Jimmy. Eventually, Jimmy ends up calling Paul, and Paul meets him at the park, and Jimmy admits that he's not doing well. Jimmy does talk with Alice, and he apologizes for letting her down, for being a terrible father. Alice says he's not giving himself enough credit for all the good that he's done as a father, and the two are able to come to an understanding. Paul is told by his doctor that he has maybe 6 months to a year before his meds don't work anymore. He's taken the maximum doses already for Parkinson's, and it isn't lasting as long as it used to, and he's worried that everyone around him is going to have to take care of him. This Thanksgiving, Gabby is hosting everyone at her house, and she really wants her mother to come, but her mother is still really hurt that Gabby told her she can't live with her. Gabby also has to worry about other Derek because he finds out that she has been sabotaging their relationship. She says she doesn't know how to be in a relationship with somebody she isn't taking care of, that doesn't need her in the same way. He finds out that she hasn't even invited him to Thanksgiving, and it looks like the last straw for him. We also learn that Brian and Charlie are going to get the baby after all. The mother doesn't want to give it to the other family anymore because they're a little too into Disney. In the final episode, we see everyone at Gabby's home for Thanksgiving, and she wants to continue a family tradition that her mother has always done, having everyone around the table say something they're thankful for. When it gets to Paul, he has a heartfelt moment where he reveals to everyone that his condition is worsening, and even though he's unlucky as far as his health goes, he feels extremely lucky because he has everyone in this room in his life. He also mentions that you can get through anything when you have people that love you that you can lean on for help. Eventually, other Derek does show up to Gabby's Thanksgiving, and he also brings Gabby's mother, and they're able to resolve some issues between each of them. Lewis, on the other hand, isn't doing well. The coworker that invited Lewis to Friendsgiving was told by a friend about Lewis's past, about his drinking and driving, and about him killing a woman, and he no longer wants Lewis to show up at Friendsgiving because he thinks it'll be awkward. This hits Lewis really hard, and he goes to the train station he used to go to with his fiancée. He texts Alice that he's there, and he needs a friend, but Alice doesn't answer because Gabby took everyone's phone at Thanksgiving. Things get really dark when Lewis looks like he might step in front of the train, but just at that moment, Jimmy shows up and talks with him. Jimmy says he's not only there for Lewis, but he's there for himself as well. After a tense moment, the season ends on a funny note, when Jimmy and Lewis start making up stories about individuals on the other side of the train tracks, just like Lewis and his fiancée used to do. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.